everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is Man, Tolkien's Legendarium and the Current Cultural Crisis, subtitle Sacred Leadership 101. Tried to record this video today, in fact did, but there was a camera issue, and so it was all a bunch of garbled gobbledygook, so I had to scrap it. So hopefully it works today, otherwise I'm just talking to myself like the meth heads on the street, and I'll probably put on a plastic trash bag and join them on the streets maybe, just to have a little bit more philosophical content to the rambling and screaming on the street corner. But anyway, basically going to discuss I guess a few things of current items, and also just get into some more philosophy as it regards to the world that J.R.R. Tolkien created in The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series, which I think is very valuable, and I think it's relevant to the current situation that we face as a culture and as a species and a civilization. But it's too bad that yesterday's video didn't work. I was dressed up in my spiffy suit, but it would have. I thought that it maybe added to the message, but it's okay, because a man is not his raiment, nor is he his skin, but rather what he carries beneath and the fire that lays within. So anyways, as evidenced by Donald Trump and Joe Biden alike, and Kamala, at a certain point, all of these political people, anybody can put on a nice suit, but to actually have a content of character takes something else that it seems like is far more rare. Ultimately, this reminds me of a conversation I was having with Space Panther recently. I was decrying the implausible and feckless female leader characters in all of these feminist programs from Netflix and Amazon Prime and whatnot. And then she was retorted like, "Well, then name some strong leaders that are men in the world." And all of a sudden I realized I struggled to actually name some. It's not that they don't exist, but that, the world that we live in, a lot of the people who are prominent, both men and women, are not really very strong of character. They're actually kind of mostly fairly despicable. I mean, whether it's politics or business, or, I guess the people that most people look up to, I feel like I can see beneath the curtain pretty easily. Like, Elon Musk, never gonna give him as a role model, right? I can't name really, many Republicans. I guess our own representative, Tom McClintock, but I mean, there's only so much he can do. Democrats, certainly not. Scientists, all the prominent ones are complete jokes in my eyes. Honestly, if I were to name a role model, I'd have to go to the world of fiction. I'd have to go to Aragorn, son of Arathorn, in the Lord of the Rings series. I find that character to be, of all the characters that have been deployed in fiction, in the world of literature, I just find the character of Aragorn to be so fascinating. And, of course, Trump did not pardon Julian Assange nor Edward Snowden, right? Left fairly ignominiously. And, had a list of 70-something pardons and as many commutations. And it was a pretty disgusting list. It wasn't just the absence of Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. It was Israeli spies and former Detroit mayors with 24 corruption counts, and it was really a sickening list. It was pretty bad. It really does add to the narrative that Trump, was just kind of a self-interested character. Again, I've spoken my piece. I really value the positive things that Trump brought to the public narrative in America. And, there were some policies that he was able to achieve. I think that, the country is better off for having had him. But that being said, there was a lot of talk, not a whole lot of follow-through ultimately. And even if Mitch McConnell threatened Trump with an impeachment conviction if he pardoned Assange, all the more reason to go scorched earth on these sons of bitches and pardon all of them. Just find additional whistleblowers to pardon just to spite them, right? What is it? To try and save your future political run? I mean, at this point, I'm not even sure if I would vote for him again if he ran in 2024 with an ending like that. Even if he did pardon Assange, even if it was third party, I probably would, because that would show that basically, again, even if it was just a symbol, it would have shown that basically that symbol of anti-establishment actually did have a genuine core of truth. But it's hard to really defend that given the final actions. And of course, the magic, trust the plan coup against the pedos in government did not materialize, of course. and the swearing in ceremony, I didn't watch it directly, but I saw some clips via some other, shows that I watch, and it was just like, pilled out Lady Gaga, just like warbling, this like pathetic rendition of the national anthem, and with a golden microphone, and it's all just, we are a parody of ourselves. And again, our sacred democracy. What sacred democracy? We are led by idiots. We are led by fools and charlatans all, and so it's almost better that the glorious ascendance of Biden and the stolen election happened, because now it allows people across the spectrum to decouple from the establishment, left and right, and to kind of, hopefully, again, maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but for the, the black nationalists and the rednecks to join forces against the establishment and basically just actually build the alt-tech, rebellion, and accelerate this mitosis of worlds. So, if acceleration is the name of the game at this point, so be it, because ultimately it's more effective and more constructive than trying to place stock in false hope while we wait for Israel to start another war and all the rest. So it ultimately reminds me again of the cultural crisis, that we have fallen away from our virtues and values as a civilization and a culture. We now, look up to the weakest and most corrupt among us. And, if Trump basically was that true sacred leader, as the subtitle implies, he would have basically gone against the threat. Again, he would have pardoned Assange. He would have done more. He would have followed through on more of the pretty words that he spoke. But ultimately, it was all more about show, all right? He was a media mogul type character. And the true leader is not a media mogul type person. The true leader does not focus primarily on appearances. The true leader focuses primarily on content of character. And so again, getting into the content of the video, of the world that Tolkien created, and this whole legendarium of, this whole, almost universe of characters and races and languages and conflicts, and this whole mythology, all fictional, but all very much symbolic of the roots of culture within our world. And Tolkien was, a world-renowned philologist, a studier of literature. He had access to a lot of ancient manuscripts in the Oxford vaults, and it's very interesting, the linguistic connections that underlay a lot of his work. And there's the race of men. He basically, even in the Legendarium, he alludes to Atlantis, right? The Numenor is the name of where Aragorn's ancestors came from. Numenor is an island kingdom that sank beneath the waves and was destroyed. Stop me if you've heard this one before, right? And they basically, the Numenorians left the island and came to Eriador, right? Eriador, again, Arya, is very much, the root of Ireland and Aryan, and that of Middle Earth, right? And brought high technology, built civilizations, built cities. Were also very skilled in war making, incidentally. But basically, and they were, the remnants were the Dunedain. In Tolkien's world, the Edain were the original race of men, right? Very similar to the word Eden, again, as in the, Genesis, Eden, right, where mankind came out of. And those who left Numenor and were remnants of that civilization were the Dunedain, right? The leader men, the Dunedain. And incidentally is also the Gaelic name for Edinburgh in Scotland, right? And again, this root of Eden, but Dún Edain, the city of Eden, right? And it's just very interesting, to see how Tolkien constructed his world, right? The world of the Shire and of Eriador is in the northwest, which is where the British Isles are in the sort of European Middle Earth, construction. And the powers of evil are deep in the southeast and whatnot, and there's this whole moral compass and whatnot. And it's just very interesting. There's the elves and the dwarves and the Ents, right? The Ents are the talking trees and whatnot. Very much a druidic, almost, pagan drawing on of sources, but also very much a spiritual, picture of the world that aligns with Christianity very much. And this is why I find it so interesting, and I'll get into this part more in another video about the spiritual aspect of, Tolkien really created a fusion of the ancient kind of English and Celtic Druidic elements, as well as, he was a Christian in life, and I feel like he merged those two very well, and also drew on enough ancient literary sources to create a fictional fusion that it itself is actually alluding to a deeper reality of the human spirit and the moral, etheric dimension that underpins all of our, existence and actions. And the hobbits, the halflings, are not exactly the great warriors, but they almost convey the real modern human, right? Of our world is not so much of great battles and swords and horses and everything, but our world occupies a more of a mundane dimension. But in the end, ultimately, it is the strength, the moral strength of hobbits that basically is the pinnacle focus of the entire story. And, the world of men, is also very prominent in the story, but in our world, that's almost been internalized, and the weakness and corruption, as well as the heroic strength, has all been internalized in the heart of mankind. And again, that's why Aragorn, it's like Aragorn's not my role model because I want to pick up a sword and be the king of Gondor. It's because he is the man who is constantly aware of the weakness in the human soul and in his own ancestors, and is always seeking to confront that corruption and that will to power, but also understands that it is his destiny to take up that responsibility and to cast off the weakness, but also accept the responsibility of that power, and lead his people to victory against the forces of evil. And it's just a very fascinating story. And ultimately, at the very end, to go with the thematics of the King of Gondor and all the men of the world basically bow down to the hobbits. Frodo, who destroyed the One Ring, which represents centralized power and that corrupting cult of power. The One Ring that rules all the other rings of power. And ultimately, in our world, what are we facing? We're facing the crisis of this globalization, of the centralization of power. And our great task is to find ways to break the ring of power, to decentralize, whether it's Bitcoin and gold going against the fiat central bank system of fiat currency, or decentralizing our education systems so our kids aren't indoctrinated with communist, gender-bending global homo nonsense. Or decentralizing our medical system so that we're not beholden to a, universal vaccine regime. And, all of our lives are now basically bound to the power of the One Ring of centralized power. And ultimately, whether or not we will, leave a world worth inheriting to our children and grandchildren is how well we can confront that, whether or not we can destroy the One Ring of power in a metaphorical sense. And the ring, is a very common thematic element in a lot of ancient mythology, from Plato's Republic to, Wagner's The Ring of Nibelung, the Ring Cycle, which is a very, very large scale, German, dramatic enterprise by Richard Wagner, and which drew on a lot of the Norse mythology, and a ring that was essentially used by the gods and of the gods in this whole story and drama of the Rhinegold and all this other things. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that this theme of a ring and this corrupting influence of power has been very consistent throughout all of history, and now we're kind of reaching the just climax of it, the crescendo. And ultimately, another thing that I like about the story of the Lord of the Rings that reminds me of our world today is that it's the victory never comes when we are at our strongest, right? The victory comes when all hope is lost and the dark has completely overtaken the land, and it seems like we're about to lose everything. The castle walls are breached. There's orcs and trolls basically just hacking and slashing, and it just seems like defeat is all but assured. But it's in that moment when we actually exorcise our own demons, and cast off the false leaders and cast off the false trappings of, the illusions that bind our society, and the true heroic aspect of the human spirit comes forth to lead the people and to, claim that victory from the jaws of defeat. In the story, right, there's Rohan and Gondor, the two kingdoms of men. In Rohan, basically, the king Theoden has been corrupted by the poisonous words of Grima Wormtongue, who is an agent of Saruman, right? Saruman, to me, also, represents many things in our society. The influence of foreign influence and, basically of duplicitous people in our society who appear to be wise, who claim to be intellectuals, but actually have, devious intents in mind, right? Of those who speak for Big Pharma but claim to be helping the people, those who speak for Israel and claim to be defending American national interests, right? Those who speak for China and claim to be working for the American worker, right? It's all, duplicitous language in the service of a foreign power. And that is Saruman, right? The one who is supposed to be the wisest among us, right? The great white wizard, who basically, ended up being an agent for the enemy, an agent for evil, and eventually was consumed by his own designs, right? And eventually, Theoden is freed from the slimy words of Grima Wormtongue, and there's that whole reclamation process. And then in Gondor, there's the Gondor, the line of kings, was originally the people of Numenor, right, of the Atlanteans, and of which Aragorn is an heir and to that throne. But they have a steward, right, of Denethor, and he's basically a very weak person, has no foresight, has no leadership ability, is basically one who just sits in the throne and basically pretends to be a ruler, right? Very much in the Biden sort of thematics, except in the story, I guess, Boromir and Faramir have a lot more going for them than Hunter Biden, the crackhead, right? But I guess Biden did have a son that fell in battle. I guess that's Boromir. But, I guess in any case, the point is that the rule of the kingdom was given over to lesser men, to weak men who didn't actually have any an interest or ability to lead in the way that seat of power demanded and required. And in the anarchist thematics, we assume that basically all hierarchies are basically coercive hierarchies, and that all state structures are inherently evil. But in ancient times, right, the king actually and the people who were the leaders of society were actually the best among us. There was a true aristocracy. It wasn't just these tyrants lording over people. It was very much the best among the people who were, leading the people forward and creating value in society. And everyone kind of voluntarily contributed in that process. And everyone kind of knew their role because we were all working together to build that civilization. We all had a common ancestry and a common identity that we were basically working with and toward. And now we don't have that, we have kind of a civic nationalism mythology, which Trump tried to play into, but it ultimately doesn't actually rally people as much as it kind of pretends to. And maybe it did back in the 50s, but again, that was back when people also had more binding ties beyond just the civic nationalism. They had a common ancestry and identity, and those things are still more powerful. And ultimately, we're having a spiritual revival on this planet at the same time that there's the political darkness is spreading and the Great Reset is underway. But again, everyone can see it. Everyone sees the darkness spreading, and at the same time, that heroic spark is also coming forward in the people. And that's again why I choose to talk about this topic today. Is really that people need to again realize that the demoralization is the defeat, and that even in the greatest external darkness, that is just a sign that we're getting closer to that confrontation, where we will have the ability, the opportunity for that heroic aspect to come forward. And even so, on a mundane level, the alt-tech rebellion is moving forward. The more that they crack down on us is the more that we have an opportunity to actually come together outside of that system and to fight back. So it's like, do not, despair the tyranny that's coming celebrate the fact that people are witnessing it and reacting appropriately. And, even if there's still plenty of enslaved people and that weakness in mankind, keeps running forward on its own right, and people just willingly enslave themselves to the media narratives, again, we still are building our civilization. We have more opportunities now than we ever had before. And luckily that confrontation won't probably come down to the Battle of the Fields of Pelennor, of, people being slain en masse, fighting against orcs and elephants and all the rest. But it really is a spiritual confrontation. And ultimately, all that is required of you is to exorcise your own inner demons, have that inner peace. Basically, the true leader is almost in a constant state of meditation and prayer, of always analyzing those ghosts in the machine, of those influences that are always seeking to permeate and corrupt us, right? Because there's corrupting influences that come down from above, and that's almost a constant. It varies in its intensity and how much it'll be able to achieve. But there's also our own weakness, and ultimately we can't necessarily ultimately control the external forces that are seeking to corrupt and control us, but we can always control our own weakness. We can always become stronger. We can always own up to our own situation and claim our destiny, and if you exercise your own inner demons and you train for your destiny, eventually one day, sooner or later, an opportunity for your destiny will arise, and you will either seize the day or you will run and play video games and hide. Sorry to always be bashing on people who play video games. Again, I learned a lot playing video games when I was young, but the more older I get, the more that I realize that if I were playing video games today, I would be missing out on unbelievable amounts of productivity and moving forward in my own life. And that ultimately, the older a man gets, the more that he delves into we want to keep our imagination alive, but we don't want to waste time, right? I'll spend an hour at the end of the day once my daughters are asleep and everything is cleaned up and the day is over. I'll watch some Lord of the Rings, I'll watch some Hobbit, I'll watch some other movies to keep my imagination and my and motivation moving forward as a point of relaxation. Now that I don't smoke weed or drink beer, I'll just have my root beer and drink some tea and watch some Lord of the Rings and whatnot. But I don't think that Lord of the Rings is on the same phase as Harry Potter. I don't think it's this idle fantasy. And I think that Aragorn really is a model of the Christian leader, of that moral strength in society that ultimately is the only true manifestation of human power that should be followed, right? That we should not ever follow the material realm. We should not give our allegiance to false men. We should always serve God, but there is such a thing as human leaders who operate in the service of God. And I think that that is not something that we really see today. We're not necessarily in Trump or in Pence at a certain point. Maybe they were closer than other things. They're definitely closer than Biden and Harris, but I really think that there's an opportunity in this fourth turning for that heroic aspect to come forward. I see it a lot in men of my generation. Two videos that come to mind, right? Vincent James of the Red Elephants, he just got banned from DLive after being banned from YouTube, right? He got kicked out of it, fired from his job because of people finding out about his political opinions, and so now he needs to find a way to put a roof over his kids' heads, which he derives from spreading the message. And he's not afraid. He just knows that he continues to show up every day, and he has the faith that the solution will present itself because he continues to show up every day. And that is a major part of the strength in which I'm talking about. John Doyle, also another YouTuber, or rather just a video maker, a younger kid, Generation Z of Heck Off Commie fame, and I really enjoy his content and his channel. And basically a message recently of we need to stop negotiating with evil. We need to stop pretending like lashing out and showing up with an AR is going to make any difference. But we need to build wealth. We need to build that community. And that ultimately when we have that strength and that seat of power within our own life and our own community, and that that communion with our Creator, then we will be able to make change. It won't be so hard once we have that sense and that seat and that foundation of power within our own lives. And that is the strength that I'm talking about, that I think is very much revealed in the Lord of the Rings cycle. So we'll talk more about this soon. Hope you guys have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Ah.